8.3 Jacob Tupper. So, in this assignment, I administered 6 different fitness tests on this client here. So, it's important to understand that from 8.2, I did a client consultation and just got a brief over understanding of this client's goals and medical history to be aware of. So their goal in particular from the consultation was to find the time to run at least 3 times a week and a maximum distance of a run 16 kilometres. And their current fitness, they run 1 to 2 times a week, so getting up to 3 times a week is quite doable, quite easy. And they also walk the dog every day and enjoy exercise. So they're very active and live quite a healthy lifestyle. However, they do smoke, they're an average drinker, and they have average sleep. Obviously, if I'm conducting some fitness tests on this client, I need to be aware of their medical history, if I need to be aware of anything, and then adjust any tests because of that. But from their medical history here, there wasn't anything I needed to be aware of. They are perfectly healthy in that respect, which is something I'll take on board when administering tests. I also made sure they gave consent to these tests, and I mentioned that I would talk through everything I was going to do with them beforehand, and they had the right to withdraw and stop any of the tests if they felt they needed to. Okay, so the 6 tests I chose to perform or conduct measured power, flexibility, speed, muscle endurance, aerobic capacity, and balance. As I thought, these all link quite nicely around his particular sport of running, which is what he particularly enjoys. So to measure power, I decided to do the standing long jump test. And this involves the performer standing behind a set line, and it's how far they can jump in a single jump. And then I, as the conductor, would then measure from the furthest back part of their body, so closest to the start line, which would usually be their heel, but potentially could be their hand if they fall over or something. And we would then repeat this 3 times after taking a short break, so they don't get fatigued throughout, and then take the best score of this. And then for this, I would need a tape measure, and then obviously a few meters of space for the performer to jump into to allow it to be safe. The next component of fitness is flexibility, and to test this, I did the sit and reach test. And due to circumstances, I didn't have access to a sit and reach box, which would usually be what you'd use for this test. So instead, I got the performer to sit on the floor with the legs straight out and obviously lean as far as they can, just like the test, and pushing a ruler. I would then measure the distance from the ruler to the base of their foot, make sure I set a marker where their foot needs to be, so I can accurately measure from that. And then obviously if it's between their foot and their body, it would be a negative score, and if it's past their foot, it would be a positive score. And obviously I repeat this 3 times and also take the best score. And for this I need a ruler and a tape measure, so it's quite simple. The next test is a 30-meter sprint test to measure their speed, and this means that I have to set 2 markers 30 meters apart, and the performer would start from one cone and run as fast as they can to the through past the other cone, and that would be from a standing start. Me as the administrator would stand at the final cone to measure their total time. This is so that I can accurately stop my timer, so that I can get the most accurate times as possible. I would then repeat this 3 times after a short break to take their best score. And for this I need cones, a stopwatch to measure their time, and 30-meter space plus a bit of runoff to allow for safety there. Next, I would perform the wall sit test to measure muscular endurance. And this would mean that the performer would have to squat against a wall with their knees and hips at 90 degrees, and their arms have to be across their body, touching their shoulders, so there's no support on their legs. So it's purely measuring their leg muscular endurance in their leg muscles, and they would have to hold this for as long as possible. And since this is a maximum test, I'll only measure this once and then take that score, and that the time stops when they are no longer their legs are no longer at a right angle, so when they start to give up. And obviously for this I just need a wall and a stopwatch. Next is the 12-minute Cooper run to measure aerobic capacity, and this is particularly important as a person who enjoys running, to measure their aerobic capacity by running. For this, I decided to have a set route of a known distance, and then the performer has 12 minutes to run as far as possible, and then after the 12 minutes, I would then calculate the distance covered. And due to equipment available, we'd be using a mapping software such as Strava and a stopwatch to measure the time. And the mapping software is to measure the distance covered. And finally, we conduct the standing stalk test to measure balance. So this involves the performer standing on one leg with the other foot just below the standing knee, touching the other leg, and their hands on the hips, and they would have to raise their heel of the foot and measure how long that they can hold that position for. And obviously they would repeat this 3 times, and I would take the best score from this. And the time stops when they break that position in any way. And I would only need a stopwatch for this. Okay, so I have decided to do the standing long jump test for power as it's suitable for their sport. So it measures their leg power, so their lower body power, which is particularly important for a person who enjoys running, as it predominantly uses lower leg muscles to help run and run quicker. You can easily compare this to normative data, and it's not the most accurate to measure leg power through this, but it is a very practical test as it's easy to conduct and access. And it doesn't take much time to perform either, because those 3 jumps and measuring would only take a couple of minutes maximum. So it's quite an easy and quick test for the performer to conduct, to perform. I've decided to use the sit and reach test for flexibility, as it's quite as flexibility is important in all aspects of sport and life, as a greater amount of flexibility means that there's a reduced chance of injury, of like pulling a muscle, for example. And I don't have access to a sit and reach box, so obviously the test would be more reliable and accurate with a sit and reach box, but this is then the most practical and reliable way of measuring their flexibility with the resources available. So it still is quite a practical test to conduct. Next is the 30-meter sprint test to measure speed. Obviously speed is very important when running, as if you have a great amount of speed, then you can obviously run quicker. But obviously the aerobic capacity allows for them to run quicker longer, but to have a better top speed would it then improve their running. Uh, High intensity using that speed, so high intensity exercise burns more fat than lower intensity exercise. So this would be important for my client, as my client was slightly overweight, as we found out in the previous assignment, and this could potentially be a factor in their running speed, like running pace, as obviously less weight, they would have to perform less of a force to move at that speed. And the 30-meter sprint test would be more reliable with timing gates, but obviously I don't have the access to timing gates at the moment, so I've decided to stand at the finish line to stop the time as soon as they pass it, to reduce the potential of human error as much as possible. And obviously this could be done in different surfaces. So obviously a track, for example, would give them a slightly quicker time, but I've conducted this on a pavement to allow them for the best grip and speed which I have available to me. Next, the wall sit test for muscular endurance. My client was mentioning that when he was trying to aim for those, his goal of 16 kilometers, he'd get to about 12 kilometers and his legs would start to really hurt and feel very heavy. And this could be an indication that his muscular endurance in his lower legs aren't as good as they need to be. So, and as it's a maximum test, it's a very short test to run because they're only doing it once. And it would be very suitable for him as a runner, as they're constantly using lower leg muscles, whereas the wall sit test measures the muscular endurance of lower leg muscles. This obviously is very good to conduct and practical, as minimal space is required, and however, it is quite hard to determine when the test actually ends precisely, but you do the best that is possible. Next, the 12-minute Cooper run test to measure aerobic capacity. This is perfect for running, as it's exactly what he does, just at a much quicker pace at a maximal rate for him. So this is very ecologically valid for the performer. However, it relies on motivation, as it's a maximal test. I didn't have access to a track, which would be the ideal situation, as it's precisely 400 meters, so you could accurately determine how far they've run, and a track also helps you run quicker, as it's good flat conditions and the surface helps give back a little bit of energy and speed into your running. So instead, I decided to do it on pavement, as it's the best alternative, and I'll be there with my client to motivate him so he gets the best score possible. And finally, the standing to stalk test to measure balance. Better balance when running actually improves technique, and obviously with a better technique they can run better and therefore quicker. So overall balance affects their performance as a runner. And obviously a standing stalk test is a very simple test to run, very quick to run, requires minimal equipment and minimal space, so it's a very useful and practical test to conduct on my client when facilities and equipment available is quite minimum at the moment.